All right. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents, and welcome to My Two Cents Religion and Philosophy. This is another channel I've created specifically for the purpose of discussing religious and philosophical issues. Those of you who are followers of my main channel know I've done a couple streams with the Red Pill Dragon in the past. He's here for this one. And we're going to be discussing the oh so controversial, whether or not should be is another question, but you hear it all the time, separation of church and state. What exactly did the founding fathers mean and when they said that, and what do people nowadays mean when they talk about it?
Let me just give you guys a hint. It's two completely different things.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I guess would you like to start us off on what kind of prompted you to want to stream about this?
Honestly, I remember I saw something that pissed me off. I don't exactly remember what precisely it was exactly, but it pissed me off, and I felt the need to make this. So, yeah.
All right. Well, what's interesting, obviously, I'm going to say, to preface this, I remain an anarcho-capitalist who opposes the existence of the state, but nonetheless, I think it's still worth discussing what exactly the founding fathers meant by separation of church and state, what their intention was behind it, and why they actually invoked such a thing in the first place. So, first of all, prior to the founding of the United States as an independent nation from Great Britain, well, and actually, if I'm not mistaken, to this day, the Queen of England remains the official head of the Church of England.
The Anglican Church.
Yes, the Anglican Church. And prior to Henry VIII creating that church, when the Roman Catholic Church was dominant in Europe, there was definitely a sense in which just about every country, be it England, France, Spain, the Anglican and Roman Catholic churches, respectively, but that the government and the church were inseparably intertwined. Both of them, well, there might be separate figureheads like the Pope in Rome, or the King in England, or I forget what the equivalent for the Anglican church is to the Pope, but there was a link between church and government, such that the government had considerable sway over what the church was doing, and citizenship
as well, probably.
Yeah, and vice versa. So really, although they were nominally different institutions, functionally they ended up being the same kind of institution, and they reserved the right to dictate the religious practices of the citizens of that country. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that any and all religious beliefs, practices of any kind were outlawed, but they did they had considerable control over what kind of religious practices people were allowed to partake in. Now, for everyone who knows the story of the Pilgrims in Plymouth Rock, this is precisely what they left England to get away from. And although there were many different religious groups in the 13 original colonies, the Quakers, I know there were certainly groups of Anglicans, Baptists, and other Christian denominations. Many of them came to the colonies to escape religious persecution.
Because the English church wouldn't let them do what they wanted there.
Exactly. Now, now moving on. The words separation of church and state, although they are thrown around quite a bit, do not actually appear in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or any of the amendments that followed. The term separation of church and state comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a Baptist congregation, the Danbury Baptists, in which he was communicating to them they were concerned that they had left the old world in order to escape religious persecution. Now, under the new government of the United States, they were concerned that the state would start trying to dictate what their religious beliefs and practices could or could not be. And Jefferson wrote to him, basically assuring him that the state would stay out of the church, and that what he meant by separation of church and state is that, unlike in England, the state has no right to make decisions for your church about how or when or whatever the case may be you will worship. And Jefferson, being very influenced by John Locke, many consider Jefferson to be an early libertarian. Yet, ironically, nowadays, this idea of separation of church and state is being used by progressives to justify precisely what Jefferson didn't want. Go ahead.
So basically, guys, what we have here, we see, like my two cents said, we see this term separation of church and state being thrown around in a very, very different way from what it used to be. Let's be honest here. And so, guys, here's the thing. The whole, like my two cents said, the whole purpose of separation of church and state, as was established in that letter, was so that the government would not interfere with the churches. The churches can do whatever they want. People can go to whichever church they choose. The churches, as long as they, do things on a voluntary basis, can do whatever they want. And that's that.
Mhm.
Progressives nowadays, what they're doing is they're doing the opposite. They're trying to do the opposite of that. They're trying to give the government power to regulate the hell out of what churches can and cannot do.
Mm-hmm. And besides simply churches, but individuals' freedom of religious expression. I know one of the biggest cases recently, of course, is Jack Phillips and the Masterpiece Cake Shop. Jack Phillips being a private business owner who makes cakes and therefore reserves the right to do business or not do business with anyone he sees fit. Now he has, as a Christian, he believes that making a wedding cake for a same-sex wedding ceremony would be a violation of his religious beliefs, since he believes that such a thing is not valid in the eyes of God. Well, first of all, I'm going to say, incidentally, I think regardless of what Jack's reasons are for doing that, as a private business owner, he reserves the right to refuse service to anyone. But he was certainly attacked by the left for claiming that, his archaic religious viewpoint in their view should not be allowed. He should not be allowed to deny someone service because of his particular.
Progressives, because they say because of this, the government should just be allowed to just go there, hold a gun to his head, and force him to provide a service for the people he didn't want to.
Exactly. Basically, they say the government should have the right to tell you cannot take actions based on your genuinely held religious convictions, no matter what they may be. Precisely what Jefferson and the founders wanted to avoid from happening. That was what was happening. Like I said, go back to the Pilgrims in Plymouth Rock. They were being told that they could not express their religious viewpoint as they saw fit, and therefore they wanted to get out of England. Well, much in the same way, progressives are now trying to tell people of particular religious persuasions that they cannot take actions in accordance with their religious viewpoint, unless, of course, it lines up with their particular view of what they should or should not be doing. So this does get back to the issue of the left wanting an all-powerful state that can tell you what you can or can't do in just about any area of your life. But it's worth noting, obviously, people's religious convictions tend to be at the core of who they are as a person. And even for someone who is an atheist or has no particular religious affiliation, your ultimate convictions about whether or not God exists, what the meaning of life is, those kind of big question, the way you answer those questions. Yes, exactly. That certainly has a big impact on how you're going to choose to live your life and who you're going to choose to associate with. And if the government is to say you cannot allow those things to impact what you can or cannot do, well, in effect, the state is saying that they are your God, and that the only religion you will be allowed to practice is the religion of statism.
Now, guys, to be fair, this can in a way go both ways, left and right, because recently one of my friends showed me an article about this recently. What happened was, I believe it was an Arkansas state senator was recently charged with corruption and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. And what he did was he was taking taxpayer money and funneling it to some private Christian school. I think regardless of what your religious beliefs are, I think we can all agree that's wrong. That's theft.
Well, certainly, yeah, yes. In that case, he was violating the law as written, and with regards to those funds, and using it for a purpose that it wasn't made for. So yes, I certainly it's not I would say it's not, but that is not particularly an issue of religious freedom. It's an issue of improper use of his position.
Yeah, I guess you have a point there.
I mean, it wouldn't be the case that just be. It kind of goes down to a progressive might say higher taxes will tax you and will use the funds to help inner city children learn to read. Now, you could argue that it is a good cause to allow to try and help inner city children learn to read, but it is nonetheless theft to use taxpayer money to fund that sort of program if the people do not voluntarily wish to fund such a program. Same would apply whether it's a religious cause or some progressive cause that a progressive, from their viewpoint, sees as a morally good cause. The issue there is theft.
The state does not have the right to take your money from you and give it to some institution that you may not give a shit if it gets funded or not. It's that simple.
Yes.
All right, what else is there to say about this?
Okay. I mean, there's really not a lot more on my end, but I think it's when this is over, I will post a link to Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist congregation. I think it would be enlightening to many people to read that. Other than that, I guess I don't really have anything more to say on the subject, but I do think it was something worth discussing. Red Pill, you got anything more?
No, but I think I've said everything I need to say. Even if it was a short live stream, it still needs to be said because there's a lot of misconception about this.
Certainly. All right. Well, thank you for checking out. This is actually the first post on this channel. So let me know what you think. Let me know anything else you might like to see on My 2 Cents Religion and Philosophy. Go ahead. I'll give a shout out to Red Pill Dragon. I will post a link. If you are not yet familiar with him, I will post a link to his channel. As soon as this is over, be sure to go over and subscribe to him. You have anything more to say?
Nope, I've said everything I need to say.
All right. And then I will catch you all on my main channel for my video upload Thursday. So that is My 2 Cents. Take it for what it's worth.